Hello, everybody. How are you? Hi, Do. Hi, DCX. Hi, Cody. Hi, Witty. Hi, Jem. Hello. I'm not going to say that I forgot, but I forgot.
So shall I text her and say you need to invite me?
I was so pleased I remembered the music. I forgot to add you as the speaker.
Oh, that's brilliant. How are you?
I'm good, darling. How are you?
I'm excellent. Really, really good. Had a really, really good week, and yeah, looking forward to today. I've been looking into the ego a lot actually online, and have read a few interesting things that I want to speak to you about, and I think will be quite interesting. But yeah, really looking forward to tonight.
Yeah, the ego's so interesting. It's one of my favourite things to talk about, so I'm really excited. Yeah, what did you find out today that kind of you're like, oh, that sounds different to what I thought?
Well, the first thing I realised that most of the sort of situations or issues that I'd had throughout my life had been because of my ego, which is, I suppose, myself, not listening to my true self and doing things, whether it was for the other people or for the wrong reasons. But we can go into that later. But there was some very funny. There's just people seem to have very opposing views of what the ego is and what it means, and whether you should kill it or be friends with it. And it's I think tonight we can unpack all of that. So yeah, exciting. So thank you everybody for being here. This is actually episode 26 now of Unminding. So thank you for all of your support. And yeah, me and Mole started this back in September. I've been on this journey with her for about 3 years, learning about the 3 principles. And I had a bit of a brainwave today, and it was like the 3 principles, they don't solve problems. They literally make them disappear. They don't exist anymore. And Moles will go a bit more into that. But yeah, I think tonight is all going to be about how to stop getting in our own way, what the ego is, and how to not be sort of not attached to it, but driven by it. So yeah, thank you everyone, and over to you, Miles.
Oh, thank you, Jem. Yeah, it's the ego's interesting, very, very interesting. It's about not letting it be our boss, which is what it wants to be. But I just want to welcome everybody, and I would just like to say I hope that after an hour of being with us that your mind slows down. What you usually find when you're in a conversation like this, that the natural organic experience is the mind slowing down, because we are speaking to something a little bit deeper. So I want you to listen to Gemini or whoever speaks as if you're listening to the rainfall, as if you're listening to your favourite piece of music, where you're not trying to necessarily work anything out. You're just listening to experience and listening to enjoy. So when you're listening to something like this, you're always going to get the most out of this if you can drop out of your mind, that rather than getting your mind to kind of get involved and trying to work things out. So just to know that, and just to see that, if thoughts come and you have resistance, just to allow that, that's fine too. But definitely by the end of the hour, there should be some peace of mind available to you, or some more peace of mind available to you. So yeah, that's really important. So the ego, what a fascinating subject. One of my teachers said that the ego is what we think it is. And I kind of love that, because we'll all have different ideas of the ego. I mean, before I did any self-exploration or deeper explorations in my life, I thought the ego was just the bit of me that was bravado, the bit of me that would show off or would try and be better than someone else. And actually what I came to see over time is just changed so much, because now I see that the ego is all of those things, but it's also when I'm inverted ego, when I feel less than, that's my ego too. There's so many areas where the ego shows up and it doesn't look like the ego. But I think through this exploration, through the understanding of thought, you begin to see it a little bit more clearly. And that's incredibly helpful to our lives. Yeah, we all have an ego. We all have an ego to deal with. So the more we can understand that it's coming from thought and what it is, the easier it is to navigate. So the ego is you when you feel amazing and you want to show off, or when you feel no good. You know, when you feel like the Queen of Sheba or the shit on the shoe. It's got that kind of polarity, and you know it's not truth because of the extremes it goes to. Like if you think about yourself and your identity, which is what I would look at ego as, you will see that actually it has so many different expressions. It isn't one thing. You can wake up one day and feel amazing, and wake up the next day and just feel like you're no good. And surely that shows you that it isn't true, because if it was truth, it would be consistent. And there isn't any consistency to the ego. Okay, the ego will always identify with the form as well. It will always look to the world to give it sustenance, to prove its point. Yeah, the ego loves proving a point, doesn't it? It loves to create drama. It's so interesting. I worked with a guy last night, and it was a guy I've worked with for a long time and hadn't seen for a little while. And he's progressed so much. I mean, it's unbelievable where he was to where he is now. But when he got on the call last night, he was incredibly resistant. It was as if the problem that he had wasn't solvable through this understanding last night. He was very, very adamant. He was very in his ego. He was very stuck. And I could tell by his face, he was almost looking at me like, you're not going to sort this one out tonight. You know, you're not gonna get there tonight, because this is a real problem, and this is this is real, and this is affecting me, and it's creating my feelings. And it was so interesting. So we spent about an hour and a half together, and at the end he was like, oh, I can't believe, he said, he felt better, he felt lighter. It didn't look the same by the end of the call. But what he said, which was really interesting, was at the beginning of the call, he really didn't want to let it go. He really didn't want me to be able to, and it wasn't me, it was the conversation, it was the principles, but he didn't want through our conversation for him to feel better. The ego had control. The ego had was in the power seat, which is where it wants to be. So it just didn't want to give in. It didn't want to relinquish its power. And by the end of it, it had to, because what we talk to is more powerful than the ego. That what we're pointing to is the energy that creates the ego. So that the creative energy is always going to be more powerful than what it creates. So then we came back with him, and it was just such an interesting thing for him to openly see how much he was getting in his own way, how much his ego was stopping him and really resisting this truth that he was able to see by the end of the call. And what was also really interesting is by the end of the call, he said, well, this is the most I've ever felt the principles. This is the most at peace I've ever felt. And I said, isn't that interesting? Because you came on the call thinking that you wouldn't feel anything and you weren't going to get any leverage or see anything differently. And then you ended the call with this deep feeling of peace, deeper than you feel that you've ever had. And that's what's available when we challenge the ego. That's why we have these conversations. This is why Jem and I started OneMinding. It's why I work with people, because it doesn't look like the ego, but it always is. Okay. And also there's that gateway through the ego when it gets challenged, when it gets dissolved, that's where freedom lives. That's where peace of mind lives. That's where that peaceful feeling that guy had last night lives. It's always us. So we get to explore. Now we're never going to be free of ego. As far as I'm concerned, the ego is the energy that creates a separation that gives us our humanness. So for me, the very fact that we're human means we're always going to have an ego to navigate. But the more we understand it, the more we see it for what it is, the easier that navigation is. Okay. So the other interesting thing is that what we're pointing to here, we're trying to get people to understand the very thing that's stopping them understanding. Okay. So just want to touch on that a little bit, because again, with this guy last night, it was what I was trying to show him was the very thing that was getting in the way. So you can see how easy it is to get caught in the ego, and how easy it can be to not do the work and not show up and not explore, because the ego is always going to find an excuse not to do it. Because why would it want its own demise? So it's like, even with Jem, it's why for the first 2 years she cancelled nearly every appointment she had with me, because it doesn't want to go there. We don't want to, the ego doesn't want to dissolve. It doesn't want to be challenged. It wants to be kept in place. It wants to be secure. And it's not secure when we look at it and we say, oh, that isn't real. That's just something that plays out within us. And it's something that can be changed, and we can have a different experience of. Well, the ego doesn't want that. I would probably say out of every 10 clients that book in, 2 will cancel at the beginning, because the ego will find any excuse not to do it. It kind of it almost feels its demise. It gets scared. It feels what the direction that you're going in is a scary one, and it kind of resists. It backs off, and it's like, oh yeah, you don't need to do that. And the reasons I've had for people dropping out are fantastic. From money to, just, I can't really say, but some are so ridiculous, but that would have looked really real to that person. And that's fine, because, that's what the ego does. It makes the form look real. It makes the world incredibly real. We get stuck. As I said, it identifies with the form. So the ego identifies with possessions. It identifies with the work that you do, your social status, recognition, your level of education, your physical appearance. Boy, it loves the physical appearance. It's always going to come and kind of either say you look great or mock you, or, whatever area you have a weakness, the ego's going to go to, and whatever area you think you're amazing in, it's going to go to. That's the ego. It's going to come into your relationships. It's going to come into your families. It's going to come into your belief systems. Look at politics, religion, race, identifications, all of these things that appear real, but none of them are you. Okay? They can't be you. Yeah, they're just expressions of this ego. They're expressions of life that the ego says, oh, I'm better because of this, or I'm worse because of this, or they're higher than me, or they're lower than me. That's the ego's game. Now, when we're onto it, when we catch it, what we get is a much freer life, because we're not spending so much time in our heads. Because if you think about the ego, where are you when you're in your ego? You're in your mind. You're in your personal thinking. Okay, when you drop out of personal thinking, when you're out of the ego, you're in presence. You're in the now. Again, we always come back to this on every call. Presence is where it's at. The moment is where everything that you're looking for is. But the ego will take you away from that, because the ego's greatest fear is that it will cease to exist. And where does the ego not exist? When we're truly present in the moment. Yeah, it cannot exist in the timelessness of the moment. Okay, so again, another reason why you will always find the ego not wanting to do this work. It doesn't want to do it. It wants to be in control. It wants those identifications to be real, because and it's not doing it it doesn't believe it's doing it in detriment to us. I don't think. I think it just does it to just to keep itself intact, just to keep it going. Sorry, I just got to have a drop of water. I'm going to cough. Yeah, it's just its nature. The nature of the ego is to perpetuate itself. Okay, always. It's when it ceases to exist in presence, it actually doesn't exist, because the truth is it's coming from thought. So if we're in a timeless moment without thought, it can't be there. It just can't be there. And the ego will then believe that It needs to come in, and it will tell you that you're insecure without it, that your security is dependent on it, that your safety is dependent on it. The ego can assure that these conditions, and it comes in and it looks so real. Yeah, it looks so real. These ego tricks, when we're in them, they're just, the appearance of them is just like, wow, that's true. I really need that to be secure. I really need that relationship. I really need that job. I really need that identification, because that tells me who I am. But we're going in the wrong direction of who I am. Who I am is before of all of those things. The who I am before those things is where all the goodness that we're looking for is. So remember, everything that ego does is rooted in its survival. Okay? But that survival is based on fear. Okay? That's the difference between when we're in our ego, when we're in our personal soul, or when we're in our true self, when we've dropped out of mind, when we're in presence. Okay? When we're in presence, there's no fear. It's just complete and utter acceptance of all that is. The fear comes when we come into the ego, when we're trying to, again, fix that security. We're trying to fix the unfixable. Because security cannot be fixed in the world of form, because the world of form is always changing. And this is what I had a thought around earlier, and I was like, wow, it's such a contradiction, because the ego fears death and is insecure and wants to live forever, and it can't. That's the thing that will die when we die. And the true self, the energy of who you are that has no problem with death, I believe is that energy that will live on forever. And it's so interesting. It's sometimes I wonder about why we have the ego. Like, what is its purpose? And I think it's around us playing this game of life. I think it's around us. We come in to be human, and in that game we have this ego that creates all this separation and all these ideas of who we're not. And I think all of that is for us to play the game, to come back to remember who we really are. Okay, so, and again, that's a personal opinion. That's just how the closest I've got to understanding why we come in and we have this thing that takes us away from our true self. Surely it's got to be so that we can play the game to find our true self again, to remember who we are. It's like the ego's like amnesia of who we truly are. And it creates drama and all these things around it that distract us. That point us in the direction of the world of form, that point us in the direction of materialism and things, and stuff, and all of that, and actually none of that creates well-being and happiness. That all comes from us. So again, it's like we go in that direction to suddenly have the moment of insight into seeing, oh, it's not out there, it was always in me. And that's the journey that, a lot of you I know are on these calls every week or have worked with me. And I know that calling home and that going deeper, we've all had an inkling of it. We've all seen something that's allowed us to embark on this journey, to inquire into who we really are. Because really that's where everything that we're looking for lives. It's not in all those identifications that I mentioned earlier. They're just play. So again, like, the ego can be fun. We can play with all these things, with the physical appearances, with the relationships, with the belief systems, when we know that they're not truly real, when we know that they're meaningless. Okay, all the things that you apply meaning to come from you. They don't truly contain meaning. That's us. That's us applying meaning. If something contained meaning, we'd all have the same ideas around it, and we don't. Everything comes from us. Okay, that's so important to see, because again, that puts us in the position of seeing through the ego, but also seeing the true power of who we are, the creative intelligence of who we are. Yeah, we step out of the relentless pursuits of the ego to find happiness, and we just drop into the innate happiness that we are. Now, we're still going to have an ego, as I've said. I still have an ego. I still get caught, and I go, oh, wow, caught again. Now, that looked really real. That looked like something I really wanted, or that person looked like they really pissed me off. But it's always my ego. It's always my perception. You know, that the ego doesn't know it's real, okay? No, sorry, the ego doesn't know it isn't real. It thinks it's a real thing. It's the deeper part of us that begins to see the unreal nature of it. Okay, and the ego will use all the tricks in the book to try and gain power again, but we begin to see that it can't have any power without us believing in it. You know, again, back to this idea that we're creating meaning, we're creating beliefs. You know, you see the people in the world whose egos are so strong, that and their belief in this self is so strong, and maybe some of them do get what they want from the world, but it can also be taken away. Can you see how that can be an insecure, that's an insecure belief? That's something that can be shattered. What we're talking about from this understanding is something that can't be taken away from us. It's something of who we always are. Yeah, it's not transient. You know, it's the depth of truth. It's the creativity. It's the wisdom. It's the intelligence. You know, it's so interesting. Another thing that I saw quite recently was that everyone wants to be special, and that's the ego. But true freedom lies in our ordinariness, in seeing that we are one, and seeing that this is all that there is, this shared being. You know, we don't have to be special. We can just be here. We can just be experiencing life. That the specialness that we're seeking is already within us, but it's in every one of us. So from that perspective, it's ordinary, because we are all it. We are all this amazing energy coming into form. We are all worthy of experiencing life, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But the ego will tell you need to add more and more and more to that. But we don't. You know, specialness is a trap. You know, it doesn't really contain anything. It's another part of the illusion. You know, it's the egoic mind running your life again. And that's a hard place to find ease and peace. The ego's not going to be peaceful, because as soon as you think you get what you want, the ego's going to say, no, not enough more. No, not enough more. Its very nature cannot be fulfilled. Okay? So again, we're onto it. We're starting to see what it is. We're starting to wake up to what it is. We don't need to identify with the self, with the character, with external things. We don't need to feed the ego constantly to be well. We don't need to feed the ego to be full, because we'll never be full. The ego can't be full. It can have the temporary appearance of fullness, but it's never truth. So again, it's all these ideas. You know, Sid Banks, the founder of the Three Principles, he said all personal thought is ego. Now that's really interesting. I haven't seen that for myself, but that guy had some really deep insights and awakenings, and you know, was clearly enlightened, and that's what he saw. So for us, let's just explore that. You know, our thinking about ourself, to me, does look like our ego. And another beautiful thing that he said. So I guess that this is something that really struck me, was that humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less. And I thought, wow. Because it's like people can get that, oh no, not you, go first, not me, and we can get into this real kind of humble state and make ourselves small. That isn't humility. That's going in the opposite direction. What humility is, thinking of yourself less, caring more about others, but not thinking less of yourself. We have to wake up to who we are. You know, we are these divine beings of light that have come into form to forget who we are, experience being human, which I believe comes via our egos, get lost, and then find our way home again. So when we see the beauty in that, when we see that that's what we're here to have, that's what we're here to do, we can explore. We can have lightness in our life. We can show up and do the things that we're meant to do. But we can do it without this need to be better than anyone else. Why would we need to be better than someone? That's ego. Why would we need to be less than someone? That's ego. Just be. Anything after the just be is our personal thinking, is our ego. What we think we have to be after the being is us playing in being human. Yeah, that's a lot of that is the ego running your life. And that, as I said before, that's fine. We're all going to have an ego. But the more we see through it, the more that we dissolve certain areas of it, the more that we understand what it is, the more peaceful we will feel. Yeah, the more home we will find within us. And that's you know that's the beauty of the ego. It helps us find our way home by being the opposite of what home is. So it appears, we see it, and if we have a moment of insight or recognition, we say, well, that's not true. That's not who I am. And then we can turn around and we say, so who am I? If I am not that, who am I? If I am not this human with these insecurities and this ego, who am I really? Who am I before that? Again, that's the juice. That's where life becomes more expansive, where life becomes more beautiful, where we begin to really see what we're here for beyond what the ego tells us we're here for. And in my mind, how I see that, and everything's always open to change. My beliefs are open to be challenged as much as anyone else's. But how I see it is it's about other people. It's about seeing ourselves as one. It's about seeing this shared being. It's about understanding who we are and connecting and sharing and being and loving and all the things. That's what we're here to do. That's before the ego. That's beyond the ego. That's the egoless state. And I think that's as close as the egoless state as we can get as human beings, is that we see that there is no other, that the other is the self in disguise. That to me, oh, okay, then you've seen truth. Now, do I see that all the time? No, there's still a Sam, a Moles or a Sam, whatever you want to call me. And there's still this identity, and I can still get caught up in it. But I get to remember also this truth. I get to remember who I am. And in that, the ego dissolves, life becomes simpler. And all I want to do is share this. All I want to do is connect with people. It just opens up the world as our playground, the world as a place where that for all of its darkness, there's just so much light. Yeah, the light isn't an illusion. The darkness is the illusion. And again, it's something that we're here to play with. It's something that we're here to see. So just coming back to this ego, this point that is so important, is that it's always going to fear its own death. It's naturally insecure, and it's always going to want to hold itself in place. Okay, so just like if you can remember that, if you can remember how the ego identifies with the world, how it identifies with the areas where you think you're amazing and the areas where you think you're terrible. It's so interesting. Like Jem and I were talking about this earlier. Actually, embarrassment is hell for the ego. but it's wonderful for the true self. That like the ego is just like, it never wants to be embarrassed. And there's something in embarrassment that's actually really enriching if you allow it. It's like, wow, look at what my ego's doing there. If you can step before it and observe the embarrassment, you'll see what that is. That's just the ego not wanting to look silly. And it just tries to put this defense up. And when that defense gets prodded or poked, it's this embarrassment comes in, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. And it's like, it can be an area where we can observe and we can see, so what was that about? What can I see a little bit more deeply about my own ego through embarrassment? You know, everything, we can learn so much by observing our behavior, by observing the self, to see the areas where we need to go to overcome this idea of the ego that we think we are. You know, it's always available to us. It's always there because it's always trying to play. But just remember, the ego, everything the ego does is rooted in survival. Okay, always. Anything that threatens its existence, like this conversation, it's going to try to resist. But it's in going to those places where you feel resistance that you're going to get the most juice from life, that you're going to see the most light, that you're going to really become at one. You're really going to throw yourself into life when you see this, because you really see it's like life is for living, it's for enjoying, it's for sharing, there's so much good. There's so much good. We just have to stop believing so much of what the mind tells us. Yeah, and then we can really show up. We can really make a difference. I know for me and Jem, I know for some of the other people on this call, we're really, really hugely into making a difference. And the more we see this, the more difference we can make, because we're coming from a purer place. We're coming from the place before ego. We're connecting to the divine intelligence. There's always intelligence on the table. Yeah, we just have to kind of challenge ourselves a little bit. We just have to settle down. We just have to drop out of our minds, and that's where it lives. Yeah, it's so much simpler than the ego makes it as well. The ego will make it really complicated. And it really isn't. It's incredibly simple. It's just, remember, if you're in complexity, you're probably in your ego. If you're in simplicity, you're probably seeing something deeper. Okay? So it's just this whole exploration of these three principles. You know, really it can be summed up in overcoming the ego, or seeing through the ego. You know, it's so enriching to who we are. It's so enriching to our lives, and it's so healing for our minds. Yeah. I've seen it so many times over and over again. When we fall out of the personal mind, when we fall out of the ego, the mind heals. And again, that's such a big part of my work, is giving people the space, showing them who they really are, showing them who they're not, and for them to drop out of the self, touch something deeper, and this innate well-being, this innate wisdom, this innate healing just comes through them, and the world changes. So yeah, it's such a fascinating subject. So I'm going to hand back over to Jem, see what she's heard. Jem, are you there? Okay, let's try and add her as a co-host again. I think she's just dropped out. If anyone else would like to come up and say something, or has heard anything, or has any questions, that would be wonderful. No, I think Jem's having some trouble. So Jem, what I'm going to say, if you think you probably be able to hear me on your other. Okay, let's. Sorry, I'm not very good at the tech, guys, as you might have noticed. Hello, Witty. How are you?
I am sitting here in the sunshine, listening to you.
Wonderful.
How do you think I'm doing?
Well, it sounds like you're doing good.
I'm thriving, Moss. Do you understand how
Good.
important you are in all of this?
Oh, well, I'm just a finger pointing. That's all.
I feel like
Hello, ladies. Good evening.
Hi, Harsh.
I love that profile
Hi, I
pic.
do have a question to you guys.
What? Yes?
Is ego somewhat connected to your pineal gland?
I would not know the answer to that, I'm afraid.
Oh, Moss.
Yeah, that's not my area.
Let me help this
not,
gentleman here, Moss.
okay.
If you don't mind.
Yes, sure.
So,
Absolutely.
to me, Harsh, what the ego is what protects my heart and my passion. Ego is what would have me die for my family and my friends. Ego is what drives me to be the best person that I could possibly be to my community, my family, and my friends. Ego causes me to push boundaries and make people uncomfortable, so I try and contain it. That's what ego is to me, sir. How do you feel about that?
Good for you, man.
I'm so sorry about that. And thank you, Witty and Harshman, for jumping in. Can you hear me, Moles?
Yeah, I can hear you, darling.
Good. And I did hear everything. I'm sorry I missed what you guys said, but that was all really wonderful. And there were so many points in there that I was sort of laughing to myself because as you sort of go through this understanding, things, one, become more simple, but two, become quite funny. Like, for example, yesterday I wore a dress that I hadn't worn for ages that it goes between being my favorite dress and my worst dress, depending on how I feel. And until we've sort of spoken about this today, so my friend said to me, "You hate that dress." And I said, "Well, today I love it." And it's the same dress. I'm the same person. It's just me looking in the mirror saying, "Oh, you look terrible today." And it's so funny. But one of the points I want to go back to, Miles, you mentioned you were on a call last night and the guy was very sort of resistant. Excuse me. His ego wouldn't let him sort of see what he's always seen before. Now, as you were speaking about it, the question that was going around in my head is, are the ego and the true self two separate things? Because the way that you spoke about it was if they were like two separate things, and I've got no idea. Are they one or?
Okay, great question. Everything is one, but has the appearance of separation. Okay, so it will appear that there's a separate self, and there's this self that's at one. There will be this appearance of a formless world and a world of form. There's an appearance of spiritual and material, and that's fine because that's how it's supposed to appear for us to have the human experience. But in truth, no, there is only one. There is one universal intelligence that has created all things, including the true self, including the ego, including the human experience, including the chair that you're sitting on. Everything is one. Okay, now when you have an experience and you touch something, as in you touch one of the principles, as you have a glimpse of thought or mind or consciousness, or you have an insight, if you're religious, into God or oneness or the universe, that tends to be what you see as this oneness. You see that there is only one energy creating all things. But from the point of view of this self, it's very, very helpful to have three principles. It's very, very helpful to see that there's a true self and an ego. Now, it's very, very interesting that everything I'm pointing to actually is me wanting you to see oneness and see before it. So even when Whitty said like his ego for him is where he defends his family and where he does, you know, for him it's a helpful thing, that's fine. That's how he sees it. So it's like the ego is what you think the ego is. Now, again, that's open to change. He may see that differently at some point, because there can be a point where you can say, well, I can defend without ego. I can defend from a place of oneness. You know, there's it can always go deeper. Okay, we can always see things differently. Nothing is set. Okay, so our beliefs are always available to be seen, to be challenged, and to fall away. Okay, beliefs are not a set thing. The ego isn't a set thing. You know, my exploration of the ego is what I've explored today, is what I've shared with you, and I've done some very deep explorations of it. So that's how the ego looks to me. And, you know, that for many of you, it probably look the same. But for someone else, it may look like your ego's a really great thing. It defends me, it protects me. But I you know, if I worked with someone, I would definitely challenge that. I would say, is that true? You know, what's really going on there? Because often the defense of the ego is one of insecurity and one of fear. Yeah, we don't have to come from that place. We can come from a place that's much deeper, that's much softer, that's much subtler, that's much more peaceful. And I believe we can still defend from that place. And actually, that for me, and again, for me, that the more I'm in touch with wisdom, the more I'm in touch with the intelligence of behind life, the more good ideas I'm going to have around protecting myself, protecting my family. Yeah, that's the difference. So it's just how you see it. There isn't a right or wrong in the three principles. There's an exploration. There's an exploration into truth. There's an exploration into self. There's an exploration and an inquiry into who we really are. And that's a beautiful conversation to have. And what that should do should be that it allows you to see things differently over and over again. So I get to see things more deeply. I get to see things differently, even after all my years of inquiry. Because, you know, we're exploring the infinite. So it can't stop. It can't be the end of exploration. The exploration carries on. We get to see more and more. We get to see deeper and deeper. We get to more and more understanding of who we are and who we are not. And so there is only one, but with the appearance of so many different things.
Well, I'm really glad that there is only one, because as I've been reading sort of different bits online, it's like you've got half of the internet saying you have to kill your ego, you know, is the thing that's causing you problems. And then the other half of the internet is saying you have to make friends with your ego.
I just want to say one thing quickly, that is a real truth, is that there isn't a you to kill the ego, because the you is the ego. So just while that was on my mind, I just wanted to say that, because it's such an important point. So all of these people that are around saying, you know, kill the ego, it's like, no, you are the ego. What happens to you when the ego dies? You know, and there isn't a you to actually kill it. It's like you don't have that power. The ego will dissolve the more you come home. Sorry, Jem. It's just that was so important that when you said that to make that point.
No, don't apologise. And that's kind of the answer that I've got to, especially hearing what you said tonight, is that just integrating whatever you believe the ego is, if it even exists, into the wholeness of what you are, and not being a servant to anything, you know, to not want to change or to not try and get anywhere. That is the ego dissolving, I suppose, because you are where you are.
Yeah. And what will happen is the ego will use your emotions as an excuse for its existence. And so you know, you'll be like, well, I feel that, so that's real. So they've pissed me off. So this, or, you know, it'll make up a whole story around a feeling to defend its existence. It's like, look, I am real because you feel like that, and it's because of this. It's like, again, back to the ego's games.
It's literally like its own movie theatre.
Bingo.
When you said earlier about all the appointments that I cancelled, the first part of me went, hey, how dare you talk about that in front of all my friends on the internet? And before I'd even got there, I laughed so much because it is so true. It's so true. When you first sort of explained it to me, I was like, F off. It can't be this simple. And it really pissed me off because I thought all these years of different therapies and different ways to mindfulness and the law of attraction, you're telling me that it is literally this easy and everything I've been doing is wrong. And yeah, I loved you and I love you. You were my friend before any of this, but you really fucking annoyed me because it was like the whole world you just had this very simple message. And I was like, oh, great. And that's it. And so, first of all, I couldn't believe that it was that easy. And so my ego was like, no way, you've wasted this. My mind was saying, I've wasted all this time, it's taken me 30 years to find this. And I was annoyed at you, which is absolutely ridiculous because you were the one that was sharing it with me. But it was just absolutely magical. But yeah, it did take me a couple of years to actually start. I dipped my foot in and out, and then once I wasn't even deciding. It was my ego saying, actually, yeah, you can be okay, possibly. But it was a real fight, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's like my explanation of the guy last night. He was really annoyed with me because he did not want me to make him feel better. He was on the call, but you could tell it was like, you're not making me feel better tonight, Sam. It's like, this isn't happening. And when he did at the end, he admitted it. It was like, oh, and even now he said, I can't be annoyed with you because I feel so good, but I really want to be annoyed with you.
No, it's so funny. And I suppose that is the ultimate separation when the ego is so different to the true self. That is when we really notice it and we get tied up and have our meltdowns and things. But well, we had a few questions. I don't know if anyone in the audience has any questions, and feel free to DM me if you don't want to chat. But
Neoshi's requested. Let's have a quick chat with him and then we'll go on to some questions.
I can't. I'm a speaker now because I've been kicked out so many times. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, darling. Let me do it. I'm waiting for you to do things, and you can't.
I can't. I'm so sorry.
Hi, Neoshi. Are you there?
Hey, what's going on?
Hiya.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm loving this conversation. I think the ego is a very important topic, and I think it's all about conquering yourself and creating that balance inside your life. I think there's some times when the ego is important, but I think those times are few and far between, and the significant majority of the time is that mind over matter mentality and conquering that ego. And this is definitely something that I not deal with, but I think we all deal with it. And it's just it is a problem when your ego gets the best of you. And if you really want to just crush it, if you really just want to step forward in life, it's all about finding that balance. And it's all about conquering that ego. So for the ego, for me, is the I. It's the worrying about the self over others. And the reality is that when you worry about collectives over yourself, it actually ends up benefiting, yourself, your family, and your community in the long run. And that whole concept right there is really hard for people to understand. And I'm part of people, right? So, it's, sometimes you feel like you're taking a step back when you humble yourself and you worry about the we over the I. But, what people need to learn is that we progressing forward and worrying about the we over the I, which is ego, that's what allows kind of like the you know, what's that quote? I don't know off the top of my head, but it's like, you know, a rising tide raises all ships or something along those lines.
Yeah.
That's my two quotes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's brilliant, and it's really interesting, and I agree with what you say to a point, but there's also it can even get more simpler than what you're speaking to, because what you can begin to see is when you get caught up in the ego, instead of it being a you that you need to like beat yourself with a stick over it, you can actually see it as thought that is coming and going, that you just got caught in, that you're now great, I'm not caught in that egoic thinking anymore, and I can come back and I could be, I can show up, and I can be different, I can be more loving, more peaceful, more kind. But what you have to understand is also, I really believe that we're meant to have an ego and we're meant to overcome it in those moments, but we can have a better relationship with it, because for a lot of people it comes up and then they get caught in the ego, and they may not act in the best way that they feel that they could act, and afterwards they'll add guilt, and they're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, and they'll beat themselves up over it. Well, that's the ego again. The guilt and the beating the self up is the ego. So it's just this little bit of a shift. It's like, again, we're always learning. We can always see things a little bit more deeply. So this separate self will come in with this ego, and it will behave in a way that maybe we don't like. Then suddenly it we'll see through it. It will dissolve, and we'll come back to our true self. If we can just see that as the natural ebb and flow of the human experience, then we don't get too caught up in where we are. We see, oh, there's an ego there. Yes, it's going to rise. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to act on it. But also I'm going to come home to who I am, and I'm going to see through it. It's like a dance. If you can just imagine a dance that sometimes the orchestra's playing some quite intense music and we're caught up in it, and other times that the orchestra's playing very soothing music and we're very peaceful and we're at one. Because then we could just get to gracefully go through life rather than kind of have to fight against it, because the fight is the ego too. It's so tricky, it's so interesting, it's such an amazing topic. But don't think that guilt isn't the ego. That's the ego too. So again, it's just an exploration. But you're so right in where you said it's like when we're with others, when we're with the collective, when we're seeing beyond ourselves, we're out of the ego. That's how I see it too. It's the less of me on my mind, the better the world is, because the better I am, because I'm out there and I'm sharing. And that's what we have to all kind of begin to see, is that, that the less we think of the self, the better it is for the self. And it sounds so counterintuitive, but it's so true. Yoshi.
So just real quick, just to, not to tie it, to cult too much, but what I love about the project is that it is the center ethos is stone soup, and I think, because this ties into ego so well, like stone soup, the concept, it's a folklore, and it's all about providing your talents into this big pot to make more for everyone. And I really believe that this whole ethos helps to eliminate the ego as much as possible, because it shifts your frame of thought into like, what can I do to better myself? And instead you're thinking, hey, what can I do to fill this pot up for everyone else and contribute to make that bigger? So, for that helps, mentally, like, kind of get away from that I ego concept. So something I really appreciate.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and I think that's why we've all found each other. Look at the connections that we've made. We are one, and that's really, we're all seeing this in our own way, and we've all connected and come together to share this in our own way. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. Thank you, Neoshi.
I'm going to step down and just keep listening, but I really love the conversation, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And we did have a private conversation about how we loved your voice. There's something about voice changes, they're so mysterious. Right, Miles, there's two more questions, and they are both mine. One of them, my ego would say, don't ask it because it feels like a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. But we'll go with the more sensible one first, just so I feel better. My ego feels better, sorry. So the first one is there a difference between ego and healthy self-esteem? And has pessimism v realism got anything to do with it?
Okay, so is that, yeah, okay, say that again.
So is there a difference between ego and healthy self-esteem?
Okay, let's do it one at a time. I think it feels like two questions to me. So is there a difference between ego and healthy self-esteem? I guess yes. I guess if I was going to explore it, I'd say the ego probably wouldn't have healthy self-esteem. I think it's such a contradiction. Healthy self-esteem would be that there'd be less of the self around. Okay, so we'll be coming back into this idea of, when do I feel good about myself? When I'm not worrying about myself, when I haven't got the self on my mind. It's this healthy self-esteem can be ego, or it can not be ego. I don't know if that makes sense. It's because it's, where are you with it? Are you feeling better than other people with it? Well, that's ego. Are you feeling that the self is at one with all other selves, and that it's having this experience of life exactly as it should? That would be healthy. So again, it's like, where is that experience? Where are you seeing that experience coming from? How is that experience manifesting in the world? What does it look like? Okay, so self-esteem can definitely be ego, but can also not be ego. So it's a bit of a non-answer, really, because it's a yes and a no. But I think I'm pointing to something there that most people can understand.
Yeah, and I suppose self-esteem is something that is not needed when we are where we're supposed to be. So self-esteem must be ego.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, we wouldn't even think about self-esteem when we were feeling peaceful and at one with the world.
Okay, so now for my wild card, silly question. So I was thinking about it earlier, and when Roger Bannister ran the 4-minute mile, obviously no one could do it before. The following month, somebody else did. And then in the following 3 years, like 15 people did. And I was wondering, is that ego? What was it that allowed everyone else to do it? And I've always been interested in that story, but then I thought, could it be ego?
It's a really interesting question, and my honest answer is that I don't know. I would have thought ego would have been the driver, or to run a 4-minute mile, because you want to do something better than everyone else, and in a way, again, there is a healthy ego in sports and in those things. We want to we want to excel, we want to be our best, but if you understand both your true nature and the ego, you can kind of play with that a bit more rather than it being such a serious thing. The fact that he broke the 4-minute mile, then so many people did quite quickly after him, I think points to possibility. I don't think it's ego. I think it's the possibility was suddenly available in people's minds. The thought had changed. It went from something that couldn't be done to something that could be done. So then suddenly other people, and then maybe it was their egos that were driving them, but for me, the thought, that the idea changed. It became something that was possible. So then people didn't have the barriers in their minds that wouldn't allow them to do it. See, this is when we're talking about the power of thought. The principles really point to this power of thought, and that's a really great example of it, because something that didn't look possible was possible, and then once it was seen via thought to be possible, other people's thinking cleared and they were able to do it. So all of our barriers, all of our boundaries, all of the things that we can't do are made of thought. Does that make sense, Jem?
Yeah, I just find it really interesting interesting thought. And as you were going through it, I thought to myself, well, it could probably be ego that would make the other people do it faster than 4 minutes, but it definitely wouldn't be the ego that kept them from not doing it faster than 4 minutes. So yeah, probably the opening of paths and realizing that something can be done. But yeah, really interesting. But the ego would definitely push the next runner to say, well, if he can do it, I can do it. But it doesn't work the other way around.
Yes, interesting. Again, it's just thought is so powerful. I mean, it is the power behind life. It's the power behind creativity. And so he created the 4 minute mile, and then other people created it after him. You know, it's almost like the energy was now available for that to happen. So it's what happened.
Yeah, he was the real creator.
Yeah, the original.
The original 4 minute man.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, I think that's a wrap. That's been a really wonderful episode. And yeah, thank you to everyone for joining us. Yeah, really great. Have you got any final words, Miles?
No, I just think it's like, explore the understanding. You know, go back to our older episodes if you're the first time on. Explore the 3 principles, see what they mean to you, how they show up for you, how they look to you, and just get interested. You know, inquire into who you are, who you think you are, who you're not, and it's such a wonderful journey, and it can show you so much, and it can make life so much better. So I think for me, it's, you know, just stay in the conversation in whatever way that appears to you. Just do that, because, you know, we're all here to really, you know, to find out who we are, to explore this inner world, and so if you can join us on that journey, and we'll always be there to help you, then please do. And thank you all for being here tonight and on the other calls, because I know many of you listen on other calls too.
Yeah, thank you so much. And any sort of subjects or any topics you want us to cover in the future, just message us. We're always available. And I've posted something up the top. It would be really great if you could all follow the OneMinding Twitter account. If you listen to us on Spotify or Fountain, to give us some stars, because it helps us get seen. It did just start for the crypto people, like our friends, but we've got lots of listeners now, sort of all over the world. So the more we can share it, the better. So yeah, if you've heard anything that has really touched you, please share it, share with your friends and family. And yeah, thank you very much. We've got all the episodes are already uploaded, and the website is theunmindingproject.com. And yes, we're just very grateful to have you here, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, thank you. And please share this episode. You know, please tweet about it. Please share it. The recording will be up for a month. So the more you share, the more people this will touch. And as Jem said, please go follow us on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and follow the Unminding Twitter page. We would really appreciate it. And thank you all again.
Thanks, guys. Lots of love.
Twitter page. We would really appreciate it. And thank you all again.
Thanks, guys. Lots of love.